Back here for the Season 1, Episode 1, series premiere of Loki as of June 9, 2021. We're back, baby. Marvel shows on the weekly, at least for the next 6 weeks. I'm pretty sure it's a 6-episode series, but we're off to a pretty good start here. We got a lot of people talking coming off the Wednesday debut of Loki. We got a lot of thoughts on it, but joining me per usual is Doc Chris Mueller. You're on the Twitter machine at BR_Doctor. Chris, what's going on, dude?
Oh, not much. I'm super happy this show's finally out.
I know, we have a lot to discuss. You said you had a lot of thoughts when we DM'd about it yesterday, so I'm looking forward to talking about it here today. And Phil, you're back as well. Phil Lindsey on the Twitter machine at PhilDL616. Phil, what's going on, man?
I'm good.
And
how are you?
I'm doing great. Let's get right into it, guys. I mean, Chris, let's start with you because I know you have a lot of thoughts on this. I mean, I don't really know what first question to ask here other than what your thoughts were overall on the season premiere of the show.
I really liked it. It was a little slower than I expected it to be, but almost to its benefit because there's a lot of ground they need to cover in setting everything up this season, and they still have a lot of stuff to do. So I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was possibly, so far, it's already becoming one of my favorite portrayals of Loki by Tom Hiddleston, just because we're seeing him kind of in a new way.
Dan, that's saying a lot, too, because he's done a lot of great performances so far, and I loved how they went back and looked back. I mean, we all kind of expected this based off the trailers, but they relived all of his big scenes from Avengers, and then he kind of relived his death and stuff like that. We kind of got all the characterization of Loki in, like, the matter of one episode, whereas in the MCU, we got it in, like, 4 or 5 movies, but we got it here in, like, 20 minutes. But, yeah, no, I thought this set the stage really well, and I still am not really sure what to expect from the show. This kind of gave us a good idea of what might be coming in the next 5 episodes, but not exactly, which is kind of what I like about it. What about you, Phil? Do you share that same sentiment that it's off to a good start here?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I think it gave us enough that was different from the 2 other shows.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like it was a lot of exposition at first, but I feel like all of the stuff going on, like all of it was interesting enough to keep me interested.
So where do you think we're going with this? I mean, obviously we're involved with the TVA here. They want to go, fix everything that the variant Lokis have been messing up, blah, blah, blah. We kind of got a hint of that at the very end of this episode of the hooded, likely Lady Loki figure that people have been speculating. What do you think is in store for the show in terms of what we're getting going forward, what the end goal is here?
I watched it twice, so there's a line in there that I thought was very interesting, and it's that Loki always loses, right? Mm-hmm. So Loki loses to make someone else better. And that's why it's so interesting that Loki is the villain of his own show. And it's almost making it a meta comment, like your purpose, because the title of this episode is also Greater Purpose. Mm-hmm. Your purpose in this storyline, at least, as the protagonist is, Loki's inevitably going to win. And in the grand scheme of things, it's going to make you, this version of Loki, into a better person. It's almost like it's like a redemption story for him.
Yeah, actually, that's a great idea because it kind of seems like they were getting into that with, again, the characterization they showed them here by reliving his death and everything else he kind of already did up to that point. Where the villain of his own show is going to be himself, apparently, which is interesting. We kind of got a hint of that, again, in the previews, and I think Lady Loki had been teased a little bit, but that looks like where we're going with this, while also exploring certain things that he was responsible for, apparently, in the course of time, including the whole D.B. Cooper incident and everything else, which was great that we got here. What about you, Chris? Do you agree with Phil, and that's probably where we're going with the show going forward?
Yeah, I have some questions about the Loki thing being the villain. Like, we never saw Loki at the end. We just saw a hooded figure, so it could be the Lady Loki thing like you were speculating. It could be somebody masquerading as Loki. Like, there's a lot of different ways they could take that, so I thought that was interesting that, like, he says to him, like, oh, it's you. We're chasing another variant of Loki, but we don't actually get to see it. So in typical Marvel fashion, they're doing this to sort of get everybody speculating on, oh, is that actually Loki? Or, what are we looking at here? So they've already set the stage for a few big mysteries throughout this, but I think just the interesting part of this show is how it's kind of examining Loki from a different perspective, and I like how Mobius sort of forced him to come to terms with the fact that a lot of what he does is just a facade for, like, to mask what he thinks is weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we've seen a lot of different superheroes kind of psychologically deconstructed over the years. Batman is a big one that a lot of colleges like to look at. And it's interesting to take a villain like Loki and sort of do that with him, because this character's already been established as being, like, so complicated, and now we're dealing with a younger version of Loki who didn't have a lot of those life experiences, but witnessed them in this episode. So it's like he's going to have a different reaction to those experiences because he didn't actually experience them,
Mm-hmm.
but he watched himself experience them. So it's like he almost has this foreknowledge now of, you know, things he might want to avoid doing.
Yeah, no, exactly. Specifically with his family, too. I mean, a lot of the moments that he watched not only had to do with his death, but, you know, I failed to mention the mother dying from Dark World. His dad kind of dying, too, but more so his dad telling him that he looked at him like a son when he was talking to him and Thor at the beginning of Ragnarok. And then kind of his bonding moments with Thor from Ragnarok as well. And then at the very beginning of Infinity War when he died, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, you mentioned it right there. And one takeaway that I had from this episode was that Loki told Mobius, he said, I don't know if it was killing exactly was the word that he used, or said something along those lines, or maybe violence.
I think he's just hurting people. Like, I think that was the word he used, was hurting.
Okay, so if it was hurting and he said, I don't like hurting people, that took me by surprise. Because obviously, again, he's the god of mischief. Maybe he enjoys doing that, but he doesn't enjoy hurting people. Like, do you think that was true? Do you think he's being honest here? Because I was surprised to hear him say that.
I do think he was being honest to a degree. Like, with Loki, the cool thing about this character is you never know if what you're seeing is genuine or if he's faking something for the sake of manipulating somebody. So, but it did feel to me like we saw Loki basically broken down over the course of this episode. Like, he's shown all of these ways in which he's failed, and he's also shown the fact that he's responsible for his mother's death, or at least partially responsible. So that right there affected him greatly. So in that scene where Mobius walks into the room and Loki kind of sheds that exterior and reveals a little bit of truth, I do think that's real. But it's interesting how, like, they've sort of been hinting at that since the very beginning. Like, Loki's always had an inferiority complex because he's jealous of Thor and all of the things that come with being Odin's son that he feels should be his. Which I thought it was interesting that in the courtroom they referred to him as Loki Laufeyson, which is his real name because he is the son of Laufey. But yeah, if you start to notice all these little things that the character does that are part of that facade that he has built up. So, like, when he first wakes up in the desert and he sees that there's Mongolian people standing right there, he immediately jumps onto the biggest rock he can find because he wants people to have to look up at him.
Yeah.
It's part of that god complex where he literally in this thinks he's a god and he's not. So it's just kind of funny to see all those little things finally starting to be examined with the character.
And that was a big part of this episode, too, because if you probably go back and watch it, and Phil, you said you watched it twice, he says that he's a god multiple times, not only just in real time, but when he goes back and watches the flashbacks, even to Thanos right before he dies, he tells him that you'll never be a god, blah, blah, blah. He's, like, obsessed with the whole god thing, because they kind of reiterate that multiple times on this episode. But yeah, no, I just find that whole thing interesting, and especially when Mobius had told him, and I think you mentioned this, Phil, where he said, You'll always be the villain. It basically said you'll always be an asshole regardless of what you do. That's just the way that it works. That's the way that time works. My question for you guys is that obviously the very beginning of Infinity War, when he makes in wrestling terms, the face turn, so to speak, and helps Thor attempt to kill Thanos and it backfires, blah, blah, blah. Don't they realize, isn't that kind of like his big character change where he shows that he can have a change of heart or not? I know, Phil, you had mentioned a little bit about that before, about the whole, like Mobius telling him, like, he'll always be the bad guy. So is that accurate, or do you think he could actually have a change of heart if he wants to, like fully, that is?
Yes and no. I feel like he's always going to do things on his own terms. Like, I feel like he's always going to do things, either for survival or for his own reasons.
Is it possible that Mobius is telling him you'll always be the bad guy because it's kind of like that psychological bullshit where he's like, listen, I'm telling you that you'll always be the bad guy just so he'll be a good guy, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I can see that. I can see it being a Jedi mind trick.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's like the end game of the show or not, but just an idea. But yeah, no, I thought this episode was really interesting, and we got to get into the cartoon aspect of it too, with the whole multiverse shit. They mentioned the multiverse, and they said that it used to be multiverse, it broke out into a war or something along those lines, and now they're trying to kind of resurrect it into one singular streamlined timeline. And so the whole thing, it felt like watching it, and if you go back and watch it, and again, Phil, you watch it twice, so maybe you'll have more insight on this, does it not feel like propaganda to a certain extent? I'm not saying what the cartoon video, what it's saying is false, but it kind of seems like whatever they're going, like it doesn't feel like it's entirely factual. What did you guys think about that whole thing? They mentioned the Nexus stuff and stuff like that too.
I don't know if I would say it felt like propaganda. I felt like it seemed like an easy way to do exposition.
Okay.
And it was an easy, stylized way to do it and make it similar to like this DMV feel that they had when he got in there and had to go through the turnstile and the ropes.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Chris? Do you think it was propaganda, or do you think it was more like what Phil said, just more of kind of an exposition type thing?
Well, I agree with Phil. I think it was an exposition delivery device, and it's one that Marvel has used many times. I actually made a little note of this, that they use explainer videos to kind of get people caught up to speed. So, like, when Thor is first arriving on Sakaar and he gets taken through that little ride that sort of explains the history of the world, Steve Rogers watches a bunch of old footage in Captain America Winter Soldier, and I think Bucky does at some point too. They have the high school news broadcast in Spider-Man Far From Home to sort of explain what's happened with the blip and the snap and all these different things. So this is something that Marvel does a lot, and it is a good, effective way of conveying a lot of information quickly, but it's starting to become kind of a trope that, like, I'm just noticing it more and more. But I actually enjoyed that cartoon. It sort of reminded me of the style of animation of some of those old, like, 70s and 80s Marvel and DC cartoons.
Do you think there's more to read into there in terms of where they might be going with the whole time travel thing? Because some people kind of look at this show as their way of fixing whatever issues they ran into with the whole time travel explanation with Endgame.
Well, I do like how the one woman that Loki was talking to in the courtroom specifically was like, no, the Avengers going back in time was supposed to happen. You taking Serac and escaping was not. And it's like, how do they decide what is and isn't supposed to happen? Because the way they explained differing timelines in Endgame with the Ancient One sort of matches with this, but also sort of doesn't. And I have a lot of questions about what is that little device that the TVA uses to quote unquote prune the timeline. Like, does that literally just wipe that entire timeline out of existence?
Are you talking about that thing they set on the ground? Or
yeah, the little charge device that they were like saying like, oh, let's set a charge and get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it completely destroys that alternate timeline from what I understood. Like,
that's kind of what I thought too, because Loki had kind of an interesting facial expression when he saw that thing go off and it started spreading across the ground. Like, he'd never seen anything like that before. And it was basically, the way I took it, just wiping that timeline completely from existence. And now the evil Loki has a bunch of those that they've stolen from all the teams that they've killed. So what kind of power does that give them?
Yeah, were they already used, is my question, when he was picking them up, or...
I don't think so. I think he's killing the teams before they have a chance to set them off, and he's stealing them.
Okay.
And it makes you wonder, because like they keep saying time works differently in the TVA, so it's like, is this variant of Loki one that already came through the TVA and is now hell-bent on destroying them? Mm-hmm. Like, there's so many different things you can theorize, because if you're talking about an area where time doesn't work the same way, then literally anything is possible.
Well, if you go by the narrative that he's always going to be a bad guy, maybe it's him from the future or from another future timeline, and he's already been through the TVA because he already went through that and went back to the own timeline.
Yeah, I found it interesting too how later on, when Loki even acknowledged he was a villain, Mobius was like, I don't see it that way. So I thought that was interesting too, because it's like, you just showed him a bunch of ways in which he's a villain. So what way are you seeing it?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too. Is he just, again, using that to his benefit so he'll help them destroy the other Lokis? Like, because obviously they need him on his side to get inside his own head, so to speak. So again, do you think they're only saying that so he'll help them, or is there more to that, you think?
I mean, I definitely think Mobius is trying to get him to help with what they're doing, but it seems like he's capable of manipulating Loki in ways that most people aren't.
Mm-hmm. Mobius, like, that is, yeah.
Yeah, just little exchanges that they have. Like, he knows exactly what Loki's going to say because maybe he's gone through this with another version of Loki before. So he's trying to maybe change that this time around. I don't know. It's so weird because... And my question is, where is the TVA? Like, is it out in space? Is it in the quantum realm? Is it in a little pocket dimension? Like, where are they where magic doesn't work and infinity stones are rendered useless?
It's got to be some sort of pocket dimension or something along those lines. I don't think it's space, because when he was asking him, he was like, oh, what are you the king of? And he said Midgard, Asgard, blah, blah, blah. Mobius said space. So if this was space too, I don't think he would have specifically referred to Asgard and Earth and other stuff like that as space, if that makes sense. I don't even know if they'll explain it. That's the thing. I'm not even sure if they might get into where this is and where it's been this entire time. I'm curious as to why they wouldn't have gotten involved with anything else. But like you said, they kind of explained it here, whereas with the Avengers, what happened with them, and arguably probably because Captain America put the stones back at the end of Endgame, I think what he did was fine, but because Loki left his own timeline and created that branch timeline, it wasn't okay. So I am curious to see how they're going to explain that. It was said by one of the directors, well, a couple things I had seen. One, which I was curious about, during that one scene in the beginning when they first introduced Mobius, in that, like, the chapel scene in, like, the 1500s or whatever, and they showed the pane glass window, and you see the devil. There was a lot of talk when the trailer came out for that, and the clip, like, months ago, maybe even a year ago, that people thought it was Mephisto, and it would tie into the WandaVision stuff. That has nothing to do with anything. I thought it might, because people were talking about it, but I think someone clarified from the show that it absolutely is not Mephisto. It's just a coincidence, and it was designed to set the stage for what we saw at the end with whatever version of Loki that was, or whoever that was killing the TVA guys, kind of mirroring what the devil did with the fire and whatever. So that is not Mephisto. But the other thing they had mentioned too was that this show is going to tie into the MCU more than any other project they've done so far, which is saying something, because Captain America or Falcon and the Winter Soldier seemed to set up another Captain America movie, and WandaVision set up seemingly Doctor Strange 2 and is going to tie into that. So When you guys hear that, Phil, I'll start with you. What do you think specifically when you hear it ties into more of the MCU than anything else? Where do you think this is going? Does it lead to more of a multiverse with the whole Spider-Man thing coming up soon?
Well, yeah, when they mentioned multiverse, I definitely was like, okay, so it's going to tie to the Doctor Strange movie somehow. And then I was like, clearly it's time travel, so we're going to get some hint of Kang. It's in the Chronoverse at some point, too.
Yeah, we talked... sorry, go ahead.
I can't think of what else, but like I said, I can see it in some ways tying to Eternals as well, because, like I said, the time travel stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. When you said Kang, too, because I know we discussed that during the preview when we spoke last week, do you think, I know we talked about how I know he was set for Ant-Man 3 whenever that comes out, which isn't for a while. Do you think we might get an introduction from him here? Because I feel like if he's going to be involved with the MCU in any way, obviously it's going to be an Ant-Man, that was confirmed, but it could start with this show, I think.
Yeah, I could see that. Maybe he has some kind of tie to TVA, or maybe the TVA at least knows of him. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a major role or if it just be a cameo or if anything at all. Again, I'm not with these shows at this point. I'm not getting my hopes up. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it's not that big of a deal because they never actually confirmed that'd be the case. But what about you, Chris? When you hear that it's going to tie into more of MCU than anything else we've seen up to this point, what does that mean to you? Like Phil said, is this going to obviously lead into Doctor Strange or the multiverse? Is that probably what they're referring to?
Yeah, I could see this having little impacts on Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, and Spider-Man, just because they're really starting to expand on the whole multiverse and time travel aspects of everything. Going back really quick to the Mephisto thing, I immediately saw that stained glass thing. It was just like, oh, people are going to start making references. And I love how Owen Wilson was just like, oh, don't worry, that devil's afraid of us. And I was just like, that's a really interesting line. So, like, that almost tells me that at some point the TVA has fucked with one of these guys who pretends to be the devil out there.
Yeah. And another thing I was going to ask him, too, about just, with the show, I forgot, I had written it down somewhere, I just can't find it, but just kind of going off what you said and earlier with the note that you took about, with the time travel and everything else, was there any other major observations that you had coming out of this first episode?
Yeah, I did put some notes here. Let me see. There was a lot of little things that I noticed. The joke about the cologne of two Tony Starks is what gave away that they traveled through time.
When did they say that? I think I missed that.
When Loki's in the courtroom, and she's like, well, who should we blame for this? And he's like, maybe the Avengers. They traveled back in time, probably to prevent me from becoming a God King. And he mentions that, you can smell the cologne of two Tony Starks, and that felt like a callback to when Ant-Man called out Tony for having Axe body spray.
Oh, yeah, right.
That felt like a little joke there, which I also noticed that there was a few shots that looked like they added to some of those Endgame flashbacks, like Loki in the elevator waving goodbye to Hulk. Like, I don't remember that from the movie. That feels like a small addition that they added.
It was. So if you go back, I had seen some side-by-sides online of the two scenes from Endgame and then with the show. That was added. And then when Loki mocks Captain America, saying whatever he said, I forgot exactly, it's not the same scene. It's actually an entirely different scene, and he kind of adds more mannerisms. So that's what I was wondering, too. They obviously didn't reshoot that, right? Do you think that was just a deleted scene? Not a deleted scene, but like one of the 30 takes they took with that scene, and they just used that for this version of the show as opposed to just replaying the same scene?
I mean, it's Marvel. They could have just shot Tom Hiddleston doing something different and inserted it into this existing scene with Evans and Thor walking around. Like, it's not impossible. They can do crazy stuff these days. I mean, that Army of the Dead movie that just came out, they completely removed Chris D'Elia from the movie because of all the sexual assault allegations against him.
Oh, and they put in that new woman, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Tig Notaro, they edited in her scenes, like, almost completely on green screen, and you could tell sometimes, but for the most part it's seamless. So for a short scene like that, it'd be very easy for them to shoot Hiddleston doing a few different things and then putting it into something that was already there.
That's what I was wondering too, but with the one scene at the very beginning when he mocks Captain America and he morphs into him, doing the voice and whatever, saying whatever, like, we'll go downstairs, and he does, like, the robot motions. That's Chris Evans, so that's why, I don't, unless they brought Chris Evans to do this again, that's what I was wondering.
That part was in the movie, right? I thought I remembered him turning into Evans for a second and mocking him.
It was in the movie, but it's a different version of the same scene. So if you go back, it
might just be a different angle or something.
Maybe.
Yeah, they probably had multiple versions of most of those scenes. I mean, they shoot and reshoot so many takes of this stuff. It's crazy. Did you guys notice that there was a Skrull in the little lobby of the TVA when he first arrived?
Yeah, the guy that was wearing a tracksuit.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that, but I saw someone else mention it.
I want to know more about that. Like, what's going on there? And who the hell is this guy that's, like, acting like an asshole and then just gets disintegrated? Like, where the fuck did this dude come from?
Was that a different version of Loki? Because he looked almost exactly like him.
He almost looked like the guy that played him in the play.
Oh, the Matt Damon version? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to see the Matt Damon version of Loki in this show or no?
Well, Matt Damon is confirmed to be in Thor: Love and Thunder, I believe. Like, as that character who was an Asgardian actor. For all we know, it'll just be a quick thing in New Asgard where he's doing another play. But yeah, I believe he's going to be in it again.
That's fucking great. Maybe they'll just reenact Loki's death from Infinity War, because they reenacted the death from Dark World and Ragnarok. I could totally see them doing that, but that's great. Yeah, no, I was wondering who that guy was too. And then another thing that got people, I don't know if it was bothered, I had seen at least one or two people kind of questioning why they did this, and people were wondering why, whatever. With the Infinity Stones, we saw a shit ton of Infinity Stones in the drawer. They pull it out. They explain that they're probably from other variants and they're completely powerless and useless within this realm of the TVA. And then the guy from Tacoma FD, I'm pretty sure, had mentioned that the actor, I forgot his name, but he said that other people in the TVA are using these Infinity Stones as paperweights. Was that just kind of like a joke, or do you think there's more to that too?
I think that was done to establish that, like, the TVA is so powerful, at least there, that these Infinity Stones are mere trinkets to them. And same thing with the Tesseract. And the realization when Loki understands that, and then all of a sudden is like, is this the most powerful whatever in the universe? Like, that sort of seemed like he understood that was the moment he knew he was in over his head. But I also noticed, did you notice that not every Infinity Stone was there? They only showed the Reality Stone, Space Stone, and Time Stone. There was multiples of all those, and then there was just one Soul Stone, but there was no Power or Mind Stones in the drawer.
Didn't they show the Mind Stone later on? Or no, they did in the end credits. I think if you look real closely, you see a Mind Stone on someone's desk, like holding down, there's a paperweight or whatever. But yeah, in the actual thing, I thought it was weird that there was no Mind Stones, but there was a friggin' Soul Stone, which is the hardest one to get. That one surprised me.
Yeah, and there was only one of them, and it was bigger than the rest.
Yeah.
But I wonder, because even though that you kind of hear a noise, like Loki picks up one of the Time Stones, and then you hear a little noise of him dropping it back in, you don't see the angle of his hand coming out. I almost wonder if maybe he pocketed a couple of them, like he did with the little time twister thing that he was using to screw with the guard.
I mean, yeah, it would make. I mean, he's the god of mischief, and he pocketed the friggin', oh my god, the Infinity Stone at the end of Ragnarok. He pocketed that from Ragnarok, and obviously that was what led into Infinity War. So yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I'm sorry, were you gonna say something,
Phil? No, I was just wondering, like, do they work outside of the time stream? And that's what I was thinking at that point. Like, I didn't understand why people were taking it as, oh, it's another joke. I was like, maybe they don't work outside of the time stream, and that's why they don't work in the TVA.
Yeah, they'd have to be in a certain timeline, you mean? Is that what you're saying?
Like, independent of the time stream, because, like, whatever the explanation we see when they're revolving around that, what we understand now is the sacred timeline, right? Outside of that, do they still work the same? Is my question.
Oh, okay. And
if Loki goes with a team to do something and they end up back on Earth, like, would a time stone work? Like, that's interesting, because maybe it's completely useless outside of its own time stream. But wouldn't that mean the stones from Endgame wouldn't have worked, because they all got plucked from different time streams?
No, but I mean, like, we don't know where the TVA is. Like, whatever it is, it exists in. Maybe they don't work there.
So I did have a thought really quick. Do you remember in Ant-Man and the Wasp when they go into the quantum realm and you sort of see a little city off in the background?
Yes. When they go to save Janet, right?
Yeah.
Didn't somebody say that was like the Chrono City where Kang is from? I thought that was like established.
Maybe. I just remember that, like, the design of it sort of reminded me of what it looked like out the window when Mobius was showing Loki where they were. Like, just a lot of circular, spherical-looking buildings. And so, yeah, I'm wondering if maybe the TVA is located in the quantum realm, and then maybe that has some kind of effect on the time stones. That would also obviously give them access to travel where they want through time, just like they did in Avengers.
Right. I mean, I'm assuming it's something like that. Either it's in the quantum verse or it's in some kind of pocket. And that's why I was like, maybe it's just that outside of the usual confines of time and space, the stones wouldn't work.
Yeah, it would make sense, because they're based around, like, the last remnants of the Big Bang, which is, like, based in our universe. So if they're outside of that, I could totally see them just becoming inert little stones. I mean, obviously that guy, like, that actor, by the way, is Eugene Cordero. He's hilarious. He's been in he was in one episode of The Mandalorian, but I know him mostly as Pillboy from The Good Place.
Wait, he's in The Good Place?
Yeah, he's Jason Mendoza's best friend.
Holy shit. Oh, yeah, back on Earth when they're like, okay, yeah, nah, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I thought I recognized him for something, because I was watching with Alexis, and she had mentioned that he was in Tacoma FD. I'm like, yeah, I had never seen that show, but I know he's from it. But then I'm like, I know I recognize him from something else, though. And we watched that whole show together like a year ago. Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
He was also in one of the episodes of The Mandalorian when all of the farmers sort of recruit him and Cara Dune to help them fend off, like, the ATST and all the guys who are running it.
Oh, is that in the first season?
I think so, yeah. And like, he's one of the farmers that shows up at Mando's ship and is like, "Can you come help us?"
Oh, okay. I don't remember that. If it was first season, I probably just forgot. But yeah, it's interesting.
So, but there was also a little thing. So, like, when Loki's first getting brought into the TVA and he's going through all those different little departments, when the exchange he has with the guy who's like, "Are you now, or have you ever been, like, a robot, or what? Or do you attest that?" And he's like, "Do a lot of people not know they're robots?" Like, that line was hilarious. But then when he steps through that machine and it takes a picture of what they called his temporal aura, it kind of looked like a rainbow to me. And I wondered if that was an intentional reference because of they knew this was coming out during Pride Month, and Loki is sort of a gender fluid character.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was exactly about to say, they said on his paper, they don't say it out loud, but if you read his document, I don't know if it's on the show itself or in the post-credit scene, but it says gender fluid, like, outright. It confirms that.
Yeah, and in the comics, I saw this in some video, whenever Odin refers to his children, he refers to his son Thor, his daughter Hela, and his child Loki.
Oh, interesting.
So he doesn't refer to Loki by a specific gender. So it felt like that was a very intentional reference, and kind of, but in like such a subtle way that I bet a lot of people didn't even pick up on it. But I thought that was really interesting and kind of cool for them to throw that in there.
Yeah, that would make sense. And you said that was in the comics. They referred to him as, Odin's child, right?
Yeah, it was something in one of the breakdown videos I watched where they mentioned the gender fluidity thing, and that's why like a Lady Loki character was so easy to do, because Loki isn't exactly tied to masculinity the way Thor.
Interesting. Yeah, they never even hint. I don't think, unless they'd go back and have to look at it, they never hinted at it in the movies themselves. So do you think that's something they kind of realized, let's do this now, or they probably already had the idea to do it before and they just never hinted at it? Because Odin's referred to him as his son before, and they just, I don't know, it's interesting.
I mean, it is one of those things where Loki's never really had a love interest, and Loki's never really expressed anything in that way. Like, his character is always just hell-bent on either destruction or conquer or whatever, revenge. So it would be just very easy for them to apply that to the character now, when it's not really anachronistic based on the previous portrayals.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm glad they confirmed that here, because it opens up a world of possibilities with what they can do going forward. Obviously paving the way for Lady Loki, which is going back to what you said at the beginning of our conversation, likely who this new hooded figure is going to be at the end of the episode going into the next one. Because like you said, they did say it was Loki. That's who they're trying to stop. But if it was Loki, then why wouldn't they just show his face? So clearly they're hinting at a Lady Loki or something along those lines. Is it not in the comics? Because I had seen someone say that it ties back into the Sif character, who was also in the movies as well up until Ragnarok, which she was absent from. Do you think that's going to be incorporated into the show, into the MCU, or is that just going to be exclusive to the comics and they're going with someone else or something else entirely for the Lady Loki character in the MCU?
I don't know. Phil would probably know more about that than me.
I don't know, because the thing that I did think that was interesting is when they showed that cloaked figure and we didn't see their face, they were in Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is where Asgard reincarnated after, like, Ragnarok. And that's where, like, Asgard was positioned. Like, I mean, obvious that's not, like, what it is in the MCU, but I thought that was very interesting that it was Oklahoma.
Yeah, I was wondering why it was Oklahoma, because it was Oklahoma in, what, the 1600s or something like that? I forgot the date exactly.
1858.
It was what, Chris?
Yeah. It was in 1858.
Oh, 1858, okay. Yeah, I was wondering why Oklahoma exactly.
Significance to that.
Yeah, I mean, there might be. I don't know if it was just a random... I mean, I'm sure we'll find out, but... Yeah, I'm curious to see what they do with it. But like I said, I thought this was... Or go ahead.
There was something significant in that scene that actually tied into something Phil was talking about with Kang. The shovel that's stuck in the ground that they first examined, they mentioned that it's from the early 3rd millennium, like the 31st century, that's where Kang is from.
Oh, well, there you go.
So I didn't know if that was intentional or if that's just something random, but I thought that was interesting.
Did they say 3rd century or 3rd millennium?
Early 3rd millennium, because it was like a futuristic looking shovel.
Oh, okay, because I heard that and I'm thinking if 3rd millennium is like the early 2000s, that could easily be Loki, right? Or, I mean, if they said that. I don't know, why would you say that why wouldn't you just say Loki outright? I mean, right, it might be more than just Loki.
Well, because I think it's a reference to Kang, because he's from the 31st century, which would be the early 3rd millennium. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully he makes a cameo. Again, I don't want this to be the new Mephisto thing or whatever the fuck people were expecting with the other shows and shit like that. It probably will be. People get their hopes up for anything. And again, I'm not guilty of it, because I am too. But we'll see. I think so far the show is a lot of promise. And one last thing before we wrap this up, Chris, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts on the back and forth that we've seen so far, the chemistry between Owen Wilson's character Mobius and Loki? I thought their chemistry and their partnership, whatever you want to call it so far, has been great.
Yeah, I really like Owen Wilson in this role. I thought it was an interesting casting move, and it had to be nice for him knowing that he's going to be one of the few guys cast in Marvel who doesn't have to go get a bunch of abs. Like he's got a little bit of a punch to him. He just looks like a regular dude. Yeah. And that had to be like, oh good, I don't have to do the steamed broccoli diet that Chris Hemsworth is always complaining about. But also, actually I wanted to ask Phil this specifically because I'm sure he's familiar with this. Did you peg who the voice was of the little cartoon Miss Minutes that did the little intro thing for them?
I didn't.
It was Tara Strong, right?
Yes. Who?
Wow. It's
Yeah.
like everywhere. I mean, like, Tara Strong has
Everywhere.
done tons of voice work.
I knew
mean,
her from
you name
Rick and
it.
Morty.
So, I wrote down just a few things she's done here that are comic related. So, she's mostly known as the voice of Harley Quinn in most of Harley Quinn's appearances. She's not the original voice, but she's done almost every version of her outside of live action and that new cartoon. She's also known as one of the Powerpuff Girls. I think Bubble is the one she's named. But then she's also just done a shitload of other comic stuff. So she was the voice of Ileana Rasputin in the original X-Men cartoon. She's been the voice of Batgirl on a million things. She was the voice of Raven on Teen Titans. A bunch of different characters on Wolverine and the X-Men. She was Scarlet Witch in the Superhero Squad. A bunch of characters on Young Justice. She did the voice of Mary Jane in a bunch of different things, including the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, Typhoid Mary, and she did the voice of Sif in one of the animated Thor movies. Like, that girl is one of the most prolific voice actors, period. Like, if you just go look at her IMDb page, it is hundreds of different things, and like everything from tiny little roles to the main character. So I thought it was just really cool that they brought her in to animate or to voice this one little thing.
Yeah, I didn't catch that at all. It was so much else going on. Like, I didn't even notice.
As soon as that cartoon started, I'm like, that voice has got to be somebody interesting, and sure enough.
That's cool. Do you think we're going to hear more of her, or do you think it was just this one episode?
I think it was probably just this one episode. I don't think they need to do any more of those little videos. Yeah. But she's one of those people that, like, she could easily pop up in another thing doing another voice. Like, she's very versatile, so they can have her do just about anything. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you guys was, what do you think the bet was that Loki lost to have to be DB Cooper?
I was wondering what the significant. I mean, obviously I know the whole DB Cooper thing, but like, did they say that was a bet, that he lost a bet in order to do that? Because I was wondering how that whole thing came about, and I was wondering if you can clarify that for me.
Well, yeah, didn't he? Owen Wilson was like, "You were DB Cooper? Come on, man." He was like, "I was young and I lost a bet to Thor." Like, what bet did you lose? And like, specifically, he told you, like, okay, go to Earth, get $200,000, and come back. Like, and this is the plan he came up with.
Can he even use $200,000 in Asgard?
No, like, that would just be, like a prop to them. But I thought it was kind of funny that when the Rainbow Bridge sort of pulls him out, like, a bunch of bills are shown flying around, which explains how they did find some of those bills out in the wild after they searched for Cooper.
Do you think we're going to see more of that, where we come to find out he's more behind stuff like that? Or, because that was kind of the original idea for the show from what people thought. Like, oh, we're going to find out he's behind all these unsolved mysteries. Do you think there's going to be more of that to come, or was it just one comedic thing for this one episode?
I hope so. I think it would be cool if each episode maybe just had one little flashback to him doing something hilarious.
Yeah, because I know, like we talked about last time, one of the upcoming
maybe
episodes.
Maybe he killed Kennedy.
Do you think Disney would actually get that fucking dark?
It wasn't Magneto, it was Loki.
Because I know on an upcoming episode, and we talked about this last time, where they might kind of delve into Pompeii and his involvement with that. That'd be pretty funny. Do you think Disney would even begin to tackle JFK? I mean, I think that'd be hilarious, but I don't know if they would actually go that deep if they wanted to.
I mean, I know Watchmen was R-rated, but they already had the comedian in Watchmen being the one who killed JFK, and Watchmen's DC now, so the DC universe has touched on it, and Marvel has touched on past presidents in other movies like Nixon and Days of Future Past and stuff, so Yeah, like at this point, as long as they're not disrespectful to Kennedy's family or legacy or whatever you want to call it, they can probably get away with implying that it's somebody from the past in Marvel's continuity that killed him.
We'll see. We'll see. It's interesting to see what else they might tackle going forward, and I hope this wasn't just a one-off and they get to do more stuff like this in the upcoming episodes. But yeah, I really like this episode. I think we're all kind of in agreement on that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they're doing going forward. So yeah, as we wind down here, Phil, any closing thoughts on Loki and what you're looking forward to in the next 5 episodes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to more time shenanigans with Loki. I'm sure he's going to try and do something. He's not going to go all the way good. He's going to try and do something to escape, or he's going to try and do something evil.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's not going to be a clear-cut babyface Loki on the show. He's definitely going to be still the god of mischief, so no doubt about that. What about you, Chris? Your thoughts on the original, or the rather premiere of Loki, and what we're going to expect going forward?
I mean, at this point, I'm trying not to come up with any major theories because obviously that didn't work out for us with WandaVision at all. And Winter Soldier, I think we probably called quite a few things before it happened, but with this, it's so crazy. You know, time travel, multiverse, all that stuff. Like, there's so many things they can do that I sort of just want to be along for the ride. So I'm just expecting to enjoy it because Tom Hiddleston is so great as Loki, and Marvel has done so well with these TV series so far that I have no reason to believe this will be any different.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I think Owen Wilson's involvement is going to be great, too. So anything Loki touches turns to gold, and I'm sure this show is going to be great. And, they're 2 for 2 so far with Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision being great shows. And I think this is a great way to kind of bridge the gap up until Black Widow comes out and all the other movies in the remainder of 2021. So,
let me ask you guys this. So there's 3 timekeepers, right?
Yep.
So let's say they decide to actually show the timekeepers at some point. Who do you guys think should play them?
That's a good question.
Like, who would be your dream casting for the 3 most important people in the timeline?
I think it would be hilarious if they got Christopher Lloyd to do one of them. Just because he's like
yes.
Like, he's in the most popular time travel movie ever. Like, that would be hilarious.
That would be great.
You just sold me. I mean, I don't know if I can come up with an answer better than that. I know we spoke when we were reviewing WandaVision about how I desperately want Bryan Cranston in the MCU in some role at some point. I don't know if that would fit him at all. It probably wouldn't, but I just want Bryan Cranston. But you sold me on the Christopher Lloyd answer because I'm the biggest Back to the Future fan in the world. I watched the 3rd movie last night because it was Michael J. Fox's birthday when this show came out. So, I would love to see Christopher Lloyd in the MCU. Yes, please.
I mean, that's it. You guys don't have anyone else. There's
Michael J. Fox? I don't know.
There's 3 timekeepers.
Yeah, Christopher Lloyd's got to be one, in my opinion. Who else can I think of? Somebody that could play, like...
I mean, based on the statues that they showed, it looked like there was 1 woman and 2 men, right?
Okay.
Can we get Bob Barker in there, or is he too old?
He's dead, isn't he?
No, Bob Barker? No, he's like 99.
Bob Barker's not dead.
Don't kill Bob Barker.
I thought maybe that was just one of those Twitter overreactions.
It definitely was. Him and Betty White still going strong.
Oh yeah, Jesus, goddamn, he's 98 years old.
Yeah.
I think it would be funny because everybody thought Magneto was coming back to get the original Magneto from the original X-Men movie.
Oh, Ian McKellen?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Ian McKellen would be good. What about a woman?
Woman.
I don't know. Is there any woman out there that people have been like, oh, we need to get her in an MCU movie or property at some point? Because I'm trying to think. I'm sure there is. No name comes to mind off the top of my head.
I mean, if we're just going like random dream casting, I don't know why, but for some reason, the original Aunt Viv, Janet Hubert, that would be a great choice. Like she was a good actress on that show. Like I'd like to see her do more. She still looked great when she did that Fresh Prince reunion.
Yeah, I don't think people remember, but she was like the lead actress in that show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would like to see her pop up. I think that would be just a fun little thing to throw her in there.
Didn't she play like in one of those like overseer roles in something else? I feel like she was in like Charmed or something else where she was like a god or something.
Let me see here. I just opened up her Wikipedia thing.
I feel like
that would have been after Fresh Prince, obviously, right?
Yes. I think it was like Charmed or some other kind of supernatural property.
I don't know. I see she did like a bunch of one-off episodes of things like the Jamie Foxx show and NYPD Blue and Gilmore Girls. I don't see anything that looks like it would be a supernatural kind of thing. It wasn't the other Aunt Viv that you're thinking of, was it?
No, I don't know. I'm probably mixing things.
Unless it was something, maybe it was something before Fresh Prince? No, she didn't do a lot before that. Yeah, I don't know. She was in The Faculty. That was a weird movie. But yeah,
at this point, anything's possible.
Christopher Lloyd would definitely be like the go-to dream casting for something like that.
Would it matter that Back to the Future is canon in Marvel already?
I mean,
no, because they established that the Big Lebowski exists, and Jeff Bridges played the villain in the first Iron Man. So,
good point.
At some point, they're going to be referencing properties that all these actors have appeared in because so many people have come through the MCU. Like,
yeah,
they probably referenced something that Glenn Close has been in at some point.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain they've referenced something that Jeff Goldblum has been in.
I was going to say, did they reference Independence Day? Or no? They must have at some point or another.
That or maybe Jurassic Park. I mean, yeah. They've definitely gone to that well before. So, it wouldn't matter that something she's been in or he's been in is canon.
Yeah.
If anything, that's just a fun Easter egg.
Yeah, no, definitely. He's still kicking too. He's still doing movies and stuff as Christopher Lloyd. So, I mean, anything's possible.
They've literally had actors portray multiple characters in the MCU already.
Yeah. So
mostly minor characters, granted, but still.
Well, yeah, it's been done. So, you know, anything's possible. I could see them doing it, but yeah, we'll see. You think we are going to see this? Or go ahead, Chris.
Does the final episode of Loki drop right before or right after Black Widow is supposed to hit?
Right after. It's July 14th, I think, is when the last episode drops, and the movie comes out July 9th.
I wonder if that's important.
I don't
there's
think
all
so.
People that seem to think there's a scene from the trailer that might show him sitting with Natasha.
Oh, I don't think that was her. I know what you're talking about. I think that more has to do, again, maybe I'm just kind of going off what other people have said, but I think that might have more to do with the Lady Loki thing. I know what you're talking about in the scene because it kind of looks like her, but I don't think that's actually Natasha.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird, but one thing we never even talked about really quick that we have to talk about is just the overall like retro futuristic look of everything in the TVA.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything had just a weird shade of orange that just reminded me of the 80s. And, like, a lot of the technology looked like it was right out of the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
I just thought that was an interesting aesthetic choice, because...
the thing that I completely forgot. So everything is analog, it looks like, because even when they were looking at the Loki's life, it was on film.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's such an interesting way to do it, because you literally have TV Loki watching the timeline of movie Loki on film.
Mm-hmm.
That was an interesting way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was interested. I was curious why they did that too, because if it's supposed to be so futuristic, they're using analog and stuff like that. I don't know if that's important or not, if that was just a stylistic choice, but I thought it was cool, though.
Yeah.
I was also a little surprised that they completely ditched the idea that all the employees at the TVA are clones.
Oh, was that the idea in the comics or something?
Yeah, Mobius is a clone in the comics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're all clones of... It was like a guy who originally developed a bunch of Marvel characters. Like, they drew him as the basis for it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Isn't he on one of the posters for the TVA in there? You're talking about Mark Rummel?
Yes, that's it. That's his name. So I do believe there was a reference to him somewhere in there, because he's like kind of a tall, skinny guy with a mustache, right?
Yeah, I think he was on one of the TVA posters when he went in there to do his trial.
They just completely abandoned that, and all of the characters were completely different. I was a little surprised by that, because I was half expecting a bunch of Owen Wilsons to be walking around.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you can see some of the influences from Grunwald on Loki's. I mean, not Loki, but Mobius's design for the show. He has the same kind of like mustache and it's similar.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it seems like there is a hierarchy at the TVA that we still don't know about. Like, who technically ranks higher? That one guard who was arguing with him, or him? Like, it seems like they were sort of on equal levels, but maybe from different departments. I don't know. It's really weird that they have this whole bureaucratic system to oversee the timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they never really established who's more in charge. And also the woman, too, the judge, I don't know if that's what you would call her, but the woman that was kind of like when they were going back and forth about like the Avengers did this and all that other stuff. I don't know where she would fall in that hierarchy either.
Yeah. And they kept mentioning... I thought it was weird that the TVA used a line that Cap used, but Cap doesn't know of the TVA, so he wouldn't know. Like, they kept referencing pruning the branches, and that's a line straight out of Endgame.
Oh, really? Did Cap say that at some point?
Yeah, when he's taking the Infinity Stones back, he's like, "Yep, trim all the branches."
Oh, interesting.
And they say that several times throughout this. When they're looking at their little monitor of the timeline diverging, and it has that red line at the top. Doesn't someone say like the branch is getting closer or something like that? And there's even a poster with a bunch of branches going out, and they're like timelines. Is what they're supposed to represent.
Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering if like when the timeline reaches that red line on that meter he was looking at, does that mean they can't reset it as easily anymore?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Does it become permanent at that point?
Yeah, or does it collapse in on itself? They never really defined any of that, but it seemed like that device was meant to just wipe it out completely, and they have a certain window of time to do that. But then if there's like two different Loki variants out there, then that means there's two divergent timelines that are probably like way past that red line date, I would assume, by now.
Yeah, no, it's definitely possible. I mean, they didn't really explain that, but do you think they'll eventually explain that in the coming episodes, or is that more just kind of left up to our own observation or whatever?
I don't know. I mean, this is one of those shows where they can over-explain things, under-explain things, or give us just enough to help us understand. Like, and that's the danger of adapting some of these wild comic book ideas to live action. It's like, do you do all the heavy lifting and exposition to explain the minutia, or do you just let people fill in the gaps themselves?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with a show like this, I do think it was important for them to do a exposition-heavy episode in the beginning to establish the world and the rules and the changes that are now being made to the MCU just by this show's existence.
Yeah.
But I don't think every episode will be like that. I think there will be a little bit of exposition and adventure and then something to contribute to the overall arc. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of shenanigans they get up to. It seems like at some point they're going to let Loki out loose. Whether he's got an escort with him or not, I don't know. But I do like that one guard that he was fucking with the time twister. She was entertaining, so I wouldn't mind seeing her, like, maybe she's the one who oversees him out in the field, and then Owen Wilson is taking care of things back at the office.
Yeah, no, that's possible. I could see them doing that. There's a lot of ideas that they can go with, and I do think at the end of the day, whatever Loki tries to pull, I think they know what he's going to do. Like, we kind of talked about it earlier, where he has his own timeline, and I thought the fact they kind of left him alone in the room, he's like, oh, Owen Wilson was like, oh, stay right here, and then he expected him just to stay right there, like, is he stupid? I think he knew what he was going to do, which is why he did that, even though he acted surprised. So, I don't know. Yeah, I do think at some point they're going to let him loose, and it's going to be a lot of fun to follow. But this has been fun to do, guys. I'm looking forward to breaking on episode 2 with you next week. And, yeah, it's going to be dropping on Wednesday, and we got 5 more weeks of this show, so I'm looking forward to it. So, Phil, people can follow you on the Twitter machine at PhilDL616. Chris, you're on the Twitter machine at BR_Doctor. And, Chris, Phil, this has been great, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks.